Apple, you didn't really have to call it Apple Intelligence. I was only kidding earlier when
Good morning! We have so many exciting updates to talk about.
It was a joke, Tim. It was a joke. Just because it starts with A doesn't mean it has to be Apple.
A is for Apple.
Okay, this just confuses everybody. Let's just begin. There was so many new features and things to talk about in today's event. There's no way I'm going to cover everything, so I'm just going to be highlighting what in my opinion are the most noteworthy things, the biggest things to take away from this event. And let's start with the biggest one that affects all of us, iOS 18, and I'll be bunching in iPadOS 18 as well. There were a lot of changes with this update that just kind of felt like about time. They're not new things, they're definitely things we've seen elsewhere, but it's nice to finally have them natively on our phones. And the good news is, from the beginning, every device that ran iOS 17 will now run iOS 18. This includes the XR, the XS, and the XS Max. Yeah, they're getting 7 years of software support. Good on you, Apple. Probably not as many of the new features, but that's going to be kind of everybody. We'll talk about that later. But we're getting home screen customization, so you can finally put apps anywhere where you want to put them. Only took them freaking like 15 years, but yeah, we finally have something that Android has had from the beginning. This was long overdue. I've been asking for it for a while, and even dark mode is applied to apps on the home screen, so things can look a lot more darker when it's nighttime, or you can change them to all have a certain accent color to somewhat match whatever your wallpaper is. Kind of like Material You, but with the Apple skin, and of course, Apple's paint on UI and interaction is always really clean. Also, quite a fair amount of changes with Control Center, letting you customize the number of tiles and different windows for now playing controls, and you can add more tiles to it. There's supposed to be lots of new APIs for developers to come up with their own Control Center toggles and widgets. Finally, by the way, they're letting you change those little toggles from your lock screen that used to have the flashlight and the camera. I've been wanting to change those since the iPhone 10 launched way back in 2017. They're finally letting me do it. Hallelujah. Again, about time. They're also changing a lot with iMessage. Of course, they confirmed that RCS is part of iOS 18 as well, but an interesting side note is they're bringing the satellite support, which you need an iPhone 14 or newer to access, now just a basic iMessage, so you can text people if you don't have Wi-Fi or cellular, but you do have line of sight of the sky. That is required for the satellite feature to work. And there's also no talk on if this is a paid feature, so as far as I can tell, this is just a free, able to text over satellite networks now via iMessage or SMS. They didn't mention RCS as part of the satellite thing, but kind of cool that if you're out in the wilderness and you just need to send a text message for a non-emergency, you can now, assuming you have an iPhone 14 or newer, and you have line of sight in the sky. So just remember, you can't be on a plane and suddenly be able to send text messages without using the crappy airline Wi-Fi network, because you won't have line of sight of the sky. They're letting you like bold, italicize, underline, and animate individual messages now, and of course the big one that was leaked and turned out to be true, you can now schedule texts, which I know a lot of people were asking for. Thank God we're finally getting it. Again, about time. Same mindset with iPadOS 18 as well. Very disappointed, very little changes, mainly just wanted to talk about menu bars most of the time. Wasn't that interesting in my opinion, but it finally got a calculator app. Craig seemed to be memeing the fact that it's like finally here. It took them way longer than it should have, and it's also way cooler than we expected. There's a lot of graphing calculator features and a new feature they called Math Notes, so that with your Apple Pencil you can be doing graphs or logs or division, and whenever you put an equal sign or whenever you line up a bunch of numbers and put a line underneath them, it just automatically can add them up. And everyday math, it seemed like kind of a teacher's worst nightmare. These are not the kind of features that teachers are going to like seeing in class, because once again, calculator app can kind of do all the work, but even more so now with like the recognition of handwriting and all the Apple Pencil features. It's like not only can you just type in numbers to do math, now you can put in really complex equations and it'll just crank them out. Seems like iPadOS 18 is coming to most old iPads, but they're definitely not supporting the 2017 iPad Pros anymore, nor are they supporting the iPad 6th generation. So a couple of iPads didn't make the cut, but iPad Mini 5 should be good. The 2018 iPad Pros and newer should be good. And apart from some new SharePlay features that let you kind of control someone else's iPad remotely if you're trying to do troubleshooting, yeah, not a lot of changes, other than I guess they're bringing over all those same home screen and control center features from iOS 18 to iPadOS as well. Wow, feature parity, I know. But still pretty nuts that they won't bring the Journal app to the iPad, even though it's on the iPhone for 2 years in a row now. Probably the most meh thing about the whole iOS, iPadOS 18 thing for me is the Photos app. I'm not in love with the redesign, at least at first glance. Maybe I need to try it out first, but they said their whole goal of it was to try to make the Photos app more simple by eliminating that menu bar at the bottom, but now there's just a lot more hidden menus and a lot more side scrolling to go on, and maybe it just takes some getting used to, but first impressions make me go, it's neat that I can filter out the screenshots and stuff, but I could see everyday people that I know of that are going to get very confused now because of this redesign, and I hope that the masses kind of adjust to it somewhat quickly. Another fairly big disappointment for me was Vision OS 2, which I guess I shouldn't have expected much. The product just launched 4 months ago, so it's not like they had a lot of time to add new things, but pretty much the majority of the changes are with Mac Virtual Display. You can go ultra wide now. Okay, that's good. The Mac display is bigger. It masks out keyboards if you have them so that you can still see them when using an environment. They added Bora Bora, which of course we all need to go to as soon as possible. And they mainly talked about new developer kits that they're designing to allow for more flat top apps and building in personas directly into apps a bit easier, but overall, not a ton of new features with Vision OS 2, which is likely why it's sitting at the bottom of the website. I guess you can AirPlay your iPhone and iPad display to the Vision Pro display. Not exactly sure why, but I don't know. For something that has as much room to grow as spatial computing, I was a little bit let down by Vision OS 2. What I was decently surprised by, though, was macOS Sequoia, which appears to be running on fairly old Intel Macs still into 2024 and 2025, including my own personal iMac Pro. I thought it was dead. I was convinced it was going to die on Sonoma, but nope, even after 8 years, my iMac Pro is still going to be getting support through macOS Sequoia, which is really cool. Great name, by the way. I totally called it on the podcast. I mean, it was a safe guess, but my favorite feature of Sequoia by far has to be iPhone mirroring. Basically, Apple now lets you control your iPhone directly from the Mac as long as your iPhone is somewhat nearby, but it can be a nightstand mode. It'll stay locked in a bag. As long as it's nearby, you can control apps and move files from your Mac to the iPhone directly just by running your iPhone in a little mirrored window, which I would use all the time, especially for a bunch of social media apps and things that are not very good or well optimized on my Mac. Now I can just access them and use my trackpad on the MacBook to act like a touchscreen for the iPhone. So basically, iOS is now on the Mac, which is pretty cool. And the compatibility dropped a few older Intel Macs, so you need a 2020 MacBook Air later, but there's still some Intel Mac Minis as well as some Intel MacBook Pros that are still supporting macOS Sequoia, which is nice to see. And presentations got a little bit more up to date with the whole screen sharing functionality. Now you can share just one window in your presentation instead of your whole desktop, and you can change the background and do the classic, Zoom call green screen effect if you don't want to show what's behind you. Not necessarily new things, but things that just should probably be built in and baked in by default. Probably the biggest surprise when it comes to backwards compatibility is watchOS 11. In my opinion, not that massive of an update. They just added a Vitals app to kind of give you bullet points on the most crucial health data you've provided the Apple Watch, and they track like your effort comparison to previous workouts. Nothing that seemed that massive of a deal, and I guess some new watch faces that just use a little bit more machine learning to pick out the photos and pick a nice background for them and give them a little bit of styling, but just a handful of nifty little features, and yet they dropped support for the Apple Watch Series 5, the Series 4, and the first generation Apple Watch SE. So you need now an Apple Watch Series 6 or later to run watchOS 11 just to access some, like translation app live activity. Like, I didn't think anything in watchOS 11 was very noteworthy or very game-changing. It seemed like a fairly simple basic update that just happened to kill off a bunch of support for Apple Watches that were not that old, in my opinion. The Series 5, I believe, came out in 2019, but so did the iPhone 11, which is easily getting iOS 18. Even the iPhones that came out in 2018 are getting iOS 18, but not the Apple Watches, which is a bit of a shame because I didn't think they were that old, and I know a lot of people personally that are still rocking Series 4s and 5s that are probably going to be a little fed up now overall. Pretty much the only big change to AirPods that I thought was fairly noteworthy are that they're letting you respond to like Siri's requests just by shaking your head or nodding, but it only works on the AirPods Pro 2nd generation, which is very specific. Really wish they would have updated AirPods Max today. They're very dated. They were dated since day one, but specifically if you have the 2nd generation AirPods Pro, you can like hear that a phone call is coming in and just decline it like that or answer it like that. I feel like people are going to answer a lot of calls they didn't mean to, depending on how good good this thing is at detecting head motion, but yeah, kind of cool, I guess, that you can respond that easily and without having to say anything out loud. You might look kind of like a crazy person though, and you might unintentionally knock the AirPods out of your ears. I know I have. But that brings us to the last thing Apple talked about today, which was a huge can of worms: Apple Intelligence. Yes, just a few weeks ago, I did a skit where I joked that they would call it that, and I was just trying to sound stupid and silly.
Price valuation, we need more AI in our products. Did I mention AI?
My goodness, Tim, why are you so obsessed with artificial intelligence all of a
No,
sudden?
we can't use the term artificial. We're calling it Apple Intelligence. That's what AI stands for.
And they actually did it. I did not have a source. I did not try to leak this by any means. It straight up just sounded like something Apple would do, and now they've done, which is kind of weird, I have to admit. But from the beginning, I just have to clarify that all of the Apple Intelligence features that affect the entire ecosystem, they require an iPhone 15 Pro or an M series chip, okay? And these only apply to the iPhone, the iPad, and the Mac. There's no Apple Intelligence coming to the Apple TV. There's no Apple Intelligence coming to Vision Pro, which is bizarre because they have an M2 chip. But I find it personally a little bit shocking that they decided Apple Intelligence features are not going to be available on an iPhone 15 regular or a 15 Plus. Any iPhone 14, 13, 12, any of those older iPhones are not getting these features as far as I can tell. And none of them are really ready yet today anyway. Even if you plan on installing the developer beta today, Apple Intelligence is not ready. I'm guessing this is all happening so fast because the partnership with ChatGPT and OpenAI was not that long ago. But yeah, essentially it's Apple just kind of rethinking Siri for the most part. Like you can text Siri now just by double tapping the home bar at the bottom. And there's a lot more generative AI features where you can just highlight a bunch of text. And again, this is on iPhone, iPad, or Mac. For mail and notes, you can highlight it and have it change the tone or simplify it. And this is supposed to be all done locally. This is not meant to be sent up to a server somewhere. They spent a lot of time doubling down on how they're trying to make the cloud more secure. Felt like a lot of fluff and hard to believe stuff to me, but the whole OpenAI partnership is them saying that if it's a query where you're asking for a recipe about something, or you want to use AI imagery when sending text to people, which looked really cringy and really embarrassing, that is just pulling data, I suppose, from ChatGPT 4.0, which I hate the name of personally. Also, is the AI in OpenAI supposed to stand for Apple Intelligence now? I don't get it. But yeah, lots of little things that all kind of stack up, I suppose. You can ask for more context and it will just remember, I guess, the emails or calendar events you have on file, and somehow, with it still being on device, secure and private, it can tell you and understand context when you're having a conversation with Siri now that just says, yeah, I remember when your mom's flight is landing, and it gives you real-time tracking info about that, and then you can, without having to repeat information, say, you know, make an event around this trip, or make a reminder to stop at this place for lunch or something like that. But a bunch of little things that I suppose could be interesting to people. They love doubling down on how it can explain a lot about products now, whereas before, you know, Siri always had to fall back to, I'll search the web for that. Now it's going to fall back on ChatGPT, it feels like. But you can ask about, how do I do things with this product, or how do I cast this onto the TV? It'll just give you a quick step-by-step guide, so maybe you don't have to show up to the Apple Store as much. So they're just building in tips more and more, I guess. But the contextual awareness and the new animation you get for Siri, and being able to type to it and have it crank out emojis and crap for you like that, is helpful, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to utilize a lot of these new AI features. But restricting it to just the 15 Pro or Max with the M chip definitely feels like a big miss in my opinion. Imagine someone who just bought a $1,000 iPhone 15 Plus, and you're already telling them that they don't have the hardware necessary for these new Apple Intelligence features. I'm not sure if it's them trying to artificially limit like the amount of queries that they're pulling from ChatGPT, because they are providing this for free. There's no membership for Apple Intelligence, so that's going to be using up a lot of ChatGPT's bandwidth at their expense, and Apple is probably just fronting the bill, or ChatGPT is just hoping that with more queries that gives them more training data, I suppose, and they'd like to partner with a big valuable brand like Apple, of course. But we're pretty confident from our own speculation in our live stream that it has nothing to do with the CPU or NPU capabilities of the chips on device, because even the Apple A16 chip has more neural processing capabilities than the M1 does. So that leaves a lot of people thinking that these large language models might be a bit RAM intensive. So maybe they're just requiring 8 gigs of unified memory from the beginning. You need a 15 Pro in order to get 8 gigs of unified memory on an iPhone, so that could be it. But in my opinion, a lot of the improvements to Siri where it just understands your context better, you can keep a conversation going along without having to specify the nouns, and have it give a lot more definitive answers or rewrite emails or come up with cringy artwork to send to your friends. I feel like a lot of this stuff could easily be brought to older iPhones, especially because they already have ChatGPT apps on them. It just feels a little bit funny to me that, you know, a $600 iPad from 2 or 3 years ago is going to gain access to Apple Intelligence, but not a $1,000 iPhone that's sold today. You know, it's just a little weird. I'm guessing it's a RAM management issue, or it might just be ChatGPT trying to slow down how many queries they get all at once. But yeah, I guess the overwhelming consensus here is that Siri should be smarter and better at understanding context. Has the same voice as before, but new animations that really show off how thin iPhone bezels are. That's what this really is about at the end of the day. And I think what I learned above all in today's keynote is that AI is kind of a confusing technology and it's difficult to explain to the masses. And Apple tried their best to kind of simplify the branding and marketing of it. We knew Google I/O did a bad job, and we knew Microsoft and OpenAI were even having a hard time trying to convey what AI unlocks and what functionality it improves. And Apple, I think, spent way too much time talking about it in ways that were kind of hard to follow and a little bit confusing to the masses from what I can tell, where it's just like, privacy, privacy. If we keep saying privacy enough times, you'll feel comfortable about the fact that Siri can now see everything and put it into contextual awareness. And they must have known that AI was a big hype word, so they had to make it like a designated portion of the keynote. But at the end of the day, what does it actually result in when it comes to changes? Siri's a little bit smarter now at pulling up pictures and files, and the main takeaway is whatever phone you're watching this on, it probably can't run Apple Intelligence. Does that tick all of you guys off? Are there more things you wish I would dive deeper into from today's announcements? I know I'm kind of skimming the surface here, but we'll have more time to talk about this in future videos. This is just meant as a general recap of things that I think everybody should know if you're limited on time, don't want to watch the full event. But comment what you'd like to learn more about or more things that you think I should dive into throughout this week as I post more content. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. It seriously helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So this is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you all in the next one.